Hi, welcome back to the Box and Lights game channel. We're playing Malifaux. As a special treat, I've got 3 quick tips for you. Don't get too excited. Cleaning up these bases. Baby wipes. That's tip number 1. If you ever get paint on your baby's arse, baby wipes will do the job. I've replaced these Soulstone tokens. These ones are from tabletopgeeks.com. I think it's ratty counters, I think they're called. And they look really cool. So I've got 2 for the soul stones and I've got 1 for the treasure token as well. And they're 30mm and I've just stuck them to some plastic counters. 3rd tip, soul stones. These ones here I got from Defenders of the Realm, I think it was. This little soulstone counter gave me an idea, and I had a quick look on eBay and I've ordered a few for myself. Aquarium gravel. If you look for plastic crystals, aquarium, you get tons of these in all sorts of different colours and they're really cheap. You can get like a big bag, 100 grams or whatever, for a couple of pounds, a couple of dollars. Alright, so that's my 3rd tip. Do with it as you wish. Okay, let's get cracking. We're going to start the game on turn number 1. There's this cheat card that I've printed off, also from tabletopgeeks.com. It's got a quick reminder here of if you're using a standard deck of cards, which suits a which. And some rule summaries, little reference tables. And importantly, down in the bottom right, a turn order track. There's only going to be 6 turns in an encounter. We're going to start on turn number 1. The other thing I've done is just made a quick note of here of how I want the terrain to work, and I've jotted this down here. So you can see that these triangle areas, these are severe territory, and that means movement costs double. Eddie's throwing the circles on, so boxes and crates. This is soft cover, and that means that anything shooting ranged attacks through soft cover takes a little penalty, and I'll show you that if and when we get there. These doors with the squares, that's blocking. I've decided we're going to have no movement restrictions, so you can move through these fine, but they block line of sight. And then we have these fire pits here, and I'm calling those hazardous. And weak, moderate or severe damage of 3, 6 or 9. In the rulebook it says 3, 6 killed, but I'm going to call it 3, 6, 9. I don't think it's quite like you fall in and you die. I think it's severe. You can get back out again. But there you go. So I'm going to keep that as a little reference point. Severe, soft cover, blocking, hazardous. So I've got some nice terrain features on the map as well. Now we're going to begin with the first turn of the game, and each player simultaneously is going to draw their starting hand, their starting control hand, and in a scrap that's 6 cards, in a bigger brawl 7 cards. So for Neverborn, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, not a terribly good hand. And for the Arcanists, 3, 12, 2, 5, 5, 9. A little bit better. But before we move on, you'll notice that on the Arcanist side, Rasputina has an ability called Arcane Reservoir. And what this says is, increase your crew's maximum hand size by 1 while this model is in play. So that means we can draw 1 extra card, and it's another 3. Next step is to decide which player is going to go first, and we do that with what's called an initiative flip. So each player will flip 1 card. Neverborn gets a 12. Arcanists get a 3, so the Neverborn would go first. However, we do have a little chance here to use our soul stones. 12 is going to be a tough card to beat, but the Arcanists are really keen to get the first turn so they can rush out and grab that treasure. So what they can do is they can spend one of their soul stones. So they've gone down to just 5 soul stones, and it allows them to do a reflip. This time we get a 7, so this replaces the 3, so we're still less than 12. The Neverborn are going to go first, and we've lost a soul stone. Soul stones are valuable, so in a real game situation you probably wouldn't have wanted to spend that soul stone because the odds were stacked against you. But I just want to demo all the options available to you. Either player, starting with the player who flips the lowest initiative, can spend a soul stone just once each. If you're tied, you reflip and start again, so you could use soul stones again on the reflip. So with the initiative, the Neverborn get to act first, and we move into the activation phase where they get to activate one of their 4 models. An activation phase is going to consist of us activating a model over here, then the Arcanist will activate a model, we flip back, the Neverborn activate a model, and take turns. Okay, so we take turns activating models until everyone has activated all their models. And once we've activated all our models, that's the end of the activation phase. We move into the closing phase, and then on to the next turn. So let's start by activating Candy here. Here's our player card. And what I like to do is, every time a player activates a model, turn it over so that we can see it's been activated. Alright. Here's Candy. Facing doesn't matter, so we can rotate our models around as much as we like. The basic rule to remember is every time you activate a model, they get 2 general action points, APs, 2 action points. So they can take actions, 1, action 2. And these cards will tell you what special actions they can perform, and what traits they have, what abilities, what spells they can cast. But what we'll do to start things off is we'll have a look here, and we'll do some walking, and we'll show you how to move these models. And here we need to look at these figures here. Walk and charge. So for one action you can walk or you can charge. We won't talk about charge just yet because that means you need an enemy in line of sight, and Candy doesn't have any enemies in line of sight just yet because she's behind this door, for one thing. But walk is a single action, and this number 5 says we can walk for one action 5 inches, or up to 5 inches. Okay? And we'd like to have Candy head off towards the middle here. So let's move Candy 2 inches to here, and then 3 inches to here. And with our second action, we could have Candy move again another 5 inches. And using both actions to walk in this way is called a double walk. So you'll hear people say, I'm double walking. So instead of moving 5 and 5, just move 10. Now you may think that was a bit dangerous to move poor little Candy here right up on her own, potentially within range of the enemy. But that's where abilities kind of come into play. So if we look at Candy's player card, we can see she has the ability Harmless. Now sometimes they've got more details on the back if you turn over, so this is kind of a summary on this side, and then if you flip it over they've got more details. But Harmless is a common ability. In the back of the rulebook they have a quick reference, so it has common abilities listed here. We have reference charts. Alright, so there's a nice little quick reference in the back. You don't have to page through the rulebook trying to find what you're looking for. And it tells us here what Harmless means. Harmless basically is an ability that allows Candy to wander about with less risk of being hurt. If she does anything other than walk, then she loses the Harmless ability because she's kind of potentially being aggressive. But it means that while she's walking around, any enemies trying to target her stand a chance of immediately failing with a willpower duel, and we'll look at that if and when it happens. There are also some zero cost actions, so any way that you can spend an action either on spells or with regular actions, they have a number here in parentheses. So there's a spell here called Runaway Home and an ability here called Pacify, and they have 0. So those are zero cost actions, which means they don't take up one of your 2 action points, but you can only perform 1 zero cost action during a single activation. As it goes, nothing's really in range for Candy to use those, so we'll end Candy's activation there, I think. And now the activation phase is passed to the Arcanists. Let's activate Rasputina here. She's quite slow. Let's do a single walk. So her walk is 3. We'll walk Rasputina over this way, I think. And now we've learned how to walk, the next thing I want to show you is how to cast a spell, and Rasputina's pretty good at casting spells. And the spell we're going to cast is called Ice Pillars. And for this we're going to need 2 50mm bases to represent these ice pillars. That's if we cast this thing successfully. So let's break it down. How do we cast a spell? Again, this is a sheet of tokens that I got from tabletopgeeks.com. This is Ratty's Arcanist and Guild counters, and there's 2 50mm counters base to base that we can use if we cast this spell successfully. So, you know, this is a great site for getting your Malifaux resources. Ice Pillars costs 1 action, that's that bold 1 in parentheses. Remember, we used 1 action to do a walk. Now we're going to use 1 action to cast Ice Pillars. The next number you see here, which is CC10, is the casting cost. And next to that 10, you can see the tome suit. And what that means is, when we flip a card, we're looking for at least a 10, and we need a tome on that card. The next figure here is the RST, is the resist duel requirement. Now if you were targeting a particular model, then should the spell be successfully cast, the targeted model must win a resist duel. We'll talk about that if and when it happens. We're not targeting a particular model with this spell, and you can tell that because there's no figure here. And also the next figure, which is range 12, this spell has a range of 12 inches. So the first thing we do is we declare the spell, so we're casting Ice Pillars, and we've got to declare the target and make sure that that target's within range. Now we don't have a target per se, but we're going to make sure that we've got line of sight to the spot, and it's 12 inches. So we want to put it, well, we've got line of sight through there, so we want to put these ice pillars somewhere around here. And the spell tells us that it has to be at least 1 inch away from an enemy, or any model, at least 1 inch away from the model. So we're going to try and put these ice pillars down about here, and that's perfectly fine, that's in range. The next thing we do, once we've declared our spell and picked our target, is a casting duel. And this is a simple duel, it's one-sided, right? There's only one person involved in this duel, strangely. So it's us against fate, really. And this is where remember we said that the casting cost is 10 tome. Okay, ice pillars, we need to get a 10, and the tome suit. And if you remember the cards in our fate deck, they have a number and a suit. So this is a 7 tome. So if I flip this, it would be a fail because, alright, I've got the suit, but I didn't get high enough, I didn't get a 10. But it's not that difficult because every model has a set of stats. we've already seen the walking and charging stat, and below that is the casting stat. And for Rasputina, her casting stat is 7 tome. What that means is when she's casting a spell, she already starts with 7 and a tome. So whatever we flip then from our fate deck is added to this. So for example, assume we flipped this card here, this 3 crow, then we would have 7 plus 3, 10, with a tome and a crow. So we would have a 10 tome crow. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense. And remember, we're looking for 10 tome, and we've started with 7 tome. So anything of any suit with a 3 or higher from our fate deck, and this spell is cast successfully. Now as it goes, we could also use cards from our hand, but we'll come to that. Chances are we're going to flip just fine anyway. So let's flip to cast this spell. And no, we didn't do it. We drew a 2 and a ram. So in total then we have 9 tome ram. We've not got our 10 tome, so we've failed to cast the spell. If Rasputina had chosen not to walk, and she could have actually used both of her actions to channel this spell. Channeling means you can cast a 1 action spell using 2 actions, but you get to flip 2 cards instead of 1, and you get to take the highest one of those 2. So that might have been a way that Rasputina could have increased her chances of casting that spell, to channel that spell. But it's not all over yet. We can try and cheat fate. And this is where we go to our control hand, and we can put down a card here from our hand to replace the one that we just flipped. You could also use a soul stone, and if we wanted to, we could spend a soul stone, flip again, but in this case it doesn't replace the card we flipped, it gets added to, right? So using soul stones is powerful, but you know, we only needed a 3, so let's use this 3 tome from our hand to cheat fate, and you can only do this once. So now we've decided we've ignored the card we flipped, and we're going to use this card from our control hand instead. And remember, you've only got a limited number of cards in your control hand for each turn, so you know, spend them wisely. But that's good value. So now we've got 3 tome. So together with our casting stat of 7 tome, we've got 10 tome. That's enough to successfully cast Ice Pillars. In addition, if we look over here, we've got something called triggers. And this is a great opportunity to tell you about triggers. If in the course of casting, so you see these 2 top triggers here, I've got CA, CB is combat, and we'll talk about that when we get to combat. And for CA it's while we're casting a spell, then that trigger triggers, alright? So we've got this one, CA Overpower, is a tome and a mask, and Surge is tome. Now we've just got 10 tome as our flip. That's triggered Surge, and if we see what Surge is, that's a common trigger, and that says after successfully casting a spell you can discard 1 control card, and I'm going to get rid of this 2 weak and draw a new one and replaced it with a 13 mask. That's much better. Okay, so you can see that's quite a powerful trigger if and when you can make it happen. Okay, I've got my Ice Pillars token. Rasputina has successfully cast this spell, and we can place this according to the spell's instructions. So what I wanted Rasputina to do was cover up those 2, objective and that bag of soul stones, and it might also stop these guys squeezing through these gaps. The rules about range are, as long as that the target is in base to base contact. Remember, the range was 12 for this spell, so as long as it's base to base within 12 inches, then we're good. Incidentally, these Ice Pillars, They are height 5. They're blocking, but they are breakable. So they're not passable until they're destroyed. That's Rasputina's activation done. She doesn't have any zero cost actions to use at the moment. So let's head back to the Neverborn